Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Demolition. So, this movie immediately comes off as a Into the Wild, Office Space kind of movie where we find our character with possibly a life altering event that is to start to make this character kind of drastically change who he is, and like he's never going back to the way things used to be. And the more and more that this character starts to be really honest with people, or is to just go on and just say, like, you know what, like, I don't really want to do this anymore. This is what I've always really wanted to do. And that's what I'm going to be doing. Hopefully you're fine with that. Like, we have that kind of character where we finally have this character that is to say, you know what, like, I finally, like, feel like there's an opportunity to be free or have freedom, and I'm going to grab that by the horns and just decide to just pull away from everything and really just have this character do what he really wants. And so I actually like the simplicity of this story, how we just have a character who just kind of stumbles upon something someday, and he's like, you know what, like, let's give this a go. Let's give this a try. So really, once I've kind of said that, like, probably the teeing up part of this will probably be pointless. Some people may not like this film. For me, like, I enjoyed it because I like it when a character is to eventually find himself becoming absolutely free, where he just kind of wings it and he's just kind of like, hey, whatever happens, happens. Let's just try this out. That's the thing that I like about this character, that it's just like, well, like, let's just kind of drop everything and start over. And so that's what this character, I think, is really trying to do. So, with that said, I would say that this, like, to me, like, is uh, a solid, good, if not great film. So it's like a good plus film. Uh, I would like to go on and almost say that it's great, just because I like it. But a lot of people are like, this movie sucked. I didn't like it. Yada yada yada. There's very few places to actually see this movie. There's like Vudu's and YouTubes and whatever, but I'll give you a free option here in a second. So there is a number of possible apps that you can go and conveniently find uh, through either Google searches or Google Play Store searches. You can go on the Google Play Store and search the word TV Crush. And currently, to the second it's recording, this movie will be on an app that is not to be called TV Crush, but when you search TV Crush through the Google Play Store, you'll find a app that has the words HD movies and a crown on it. You can download that, be able to watch this movie for absolutely free. Yeah, it'll probably have subtitles on this movie throughout the whole entire time, but I honestly think that that would probably be a benefit because this movie is kind of quiet. Um, so, with that said, some people might want the subtitles, or some people might just be like, I don't like that there's subtitles on it. And sorry, but that's a one free way to say that you've seen Demolition. You can also Google search apps called Letters C Movies or Fox HD Movies. I've explained these throughout a number of existences, through a number of different reviews. So if I'm not saying it in exact detail, Fox HD Movies will have a logo that'll say so, but a title that'll say something different. Play 1080p HD Movies will actually be the title of it, but search the word Fox HD Movies and it'll come up and you'll be able to find this app. Or you can Google search letter C movies, so a letter and then a word, and just say that it's an app, and there, in fact, you'll probably be able to find this. Download both of those things and you'll be able to see whatever you want. Brand new releases, shows that are exclusively upon like HBO Maxes and whatever the heck else that somebody would probably watch at some point, Stars, Apple TVs, yada yada yadas. Let's move on. So, teeing it up, what is this movie about? So, and like I'm gonna like when I go into spoilers, it'll feel like probably what I say here is probably the same thing. But there's only one way to like tee up and slice and dice this. So Davis and Julia are going and driving in this car. They get into a car accident. Davis is to wake up with his father-in-law telling him that his wife is dead. So all of a sudden, Davis, after this life-changing event of losing his wife, is to really tell people the truth about his wife. And it seems that his wife is to have a secret also later on in this movie that I completely forgot about. But then Davis is to go on and start to just take things apart. When there's things that are starting to really freaking annoy him, like there is a refrigerator that leaks, there is a bathroom stall door that keeps like squeaking, Davis decides to just freaking take it apart. He goes into his office, taking a number of computers and laptops and whatever. He takes it all apart. Because at this point, he really just doesn't care. Like, this guy probably must have enough money to just be like, I don't need or want of anything. And so Davis goes on and he like further destroys or demolitions everything. And I mean everything. Because this guy just goes on and he's like, nah, like I'll just like I'm just taking apart everything that used to be with of course myself and Julia's. Like I'm taking every single thing down because I don't want it at all to either remind me of her or like I just want like we have this kind of metaphor that this character is possibly if he kind of deconstructs everything, then maybe at the end of all this he can kind of put himself back together. Because once this guy really is to like deal with this loss, it feels like he is just kind of very shut off emotionally to the point of him just kind of wanting to go to work, like not really listening to people, and because for the longest time he has never really listened to people. Like he's probably been shut off for a very long time. Supposedly 10 to 12 years. He has just been kind of just numb. So, with that said, that's all that I'm going to say in a very roundabout, cryptic sense way that has something to do somewhere in this movie. So let's go out of our way to go into that double 5 time territory. Let's just go into this thing that is to be called Spoiler Time. Spoiler Time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So, like I had said, this movie kind of starts with Davis and Julia kind of getting up, getting ready to go to work. So, it seems that Davis likes to consistently take this like subway to work, or this I'm assuming it's like a light rail or a subway, but anyways, but it doesn't really seem like that's happening in the early stage of this film. But anyways, Davis and Julia are driving, I guess, both to work. And Julia is to remind Davis that, of course, there is to be this fridge that is leaking. And Julia reminds Davis, it's like, well, hey, don't you have tools to fix this? Like, Dad gave you tools like 2 years ago. Like, can't you just fix that leak? And Davis is like, sure, I'll get right on it. But really, what he's doing is just kind of repeating what she had said. Like, sure, like the fridge is leaking, and Julia tells Davis, is like, well, hey, like, don't just repeat what I said to make it seem like you're really listening. And Davis is like, sure, I'll get to it. Like, so Davis all of a sudden is looking out the window as a car that is, I guess, a station wagon that is to smash into these people. Davis is going, whoa, 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 and he's not saying anything, so there's not enough time to stop, to swerve, to whatever, so car accident happens. All of a sudden, the next thing we see is Davis is in this hospital. He's in this chair. He's not even with his wife. He's kind of in some part of the hospital randomly somewhere. Phil, who of course is Davis's father-in-law, because Davis is actually Julia's father, and Phil was calling them as they were driving before this whole accident happened, and so Phil was mentioning how Julia was having some argument with her mother, and we found out that later on in the movie that it was just some silly thing about these towels that someone didn't like, and so like they didn't talk for 3 days after that because of the whole towel situation. So Davis and Phil are just having this short exchange of Phil telling Davis that Julie is dead. Davis kind of wakes up, goes into the, I guess, room that Julia was being taken care of, realizing that there is a number of things of blood upon the floor. So Davis is to go on and try to get some candy out of this vending machine, which is a M&M peanut, the yellow kind. You would have thought it would have been honestly the orange kind or the red kind, whatever the peanut butter ones are, because those are actually pretty good. I like those. Like, I like the peanut butter kind. I don't give a shit about the other ones. Why is he saying this information? Why not? Anyways, let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite M&Ms? Why is he asking? Because I can. So Davis is like smacking this vending machine. This is Jake Gyllenhaal, by the way, if you don't know who Jake Gyllenhaal is. And so Davis is going on and asking these hospital people, it's like, well, hey, can I get like a refund from this vending machine because it's not working? Like, did he try and like punch the numbers again and see if the thing will just kind of fly out? I've had that problem before. I realized, oh, like you can get a twofer. Great, saves money to get twice the whatever, and it's not my fault that the vending machines are garbage. So the nurse, I'm going to say nurse. I don't really know the scrubs. Uh, like, it looks like this is kind of a very generic person, orderly, whoever. Because I know like the certain kind of colors do certain kind of things. Where I think like blue is like the general doctor, and green are like the surgeon doctors, and like I think pink is like nurses. I don't know, I watched a lot of Scrubs. So, and white means doctor? Anyways, pushing on. So, because white coat, not white scrubs. Anyways, pushing on. So, the guy who is talking to Davis is telling him, it's like, well, we don't really deal with that here. Like, you can go on and call the number that's on there, or you can go on and like mail a letter to these people. I'm like, man, isn't that a lot of work to like? You have to spend whatever the price of paper and freaking envelope and stamp to try to go on and just get refunded. Like, it makes no real sense. But then we turn around and we kind of have Davis, who is just consistently sending so many letters to this girl who we end up finding out is Karen, because he sends a lot of letters. He sends like 4 about this one whole situation, and he just keeps sending her letters because he just doesn't give a because he's going on and he's like, yeah, I don't think, like, all of this is probably irrelevant, but I don't really care. Like, I'm just gonna keep sending her these letters. And I'm like, good for you. Like, okay, like, this person is gonna say that you're really f***ing weird, but like, yeah, whatever. Like, we have it where like Sheldon had sent numerous letters to a certain place that like continued to put the flags the wrong way. So, like, I guess eventually that worked at some point. It doesn't matter. So, Davis goes on and he is to have this funeral for Julia. And so they go on and, like, everybody's at this house. They're kind of all mourning this woman's loss. And so the story gets really interesting as we like further go along. The little like truths that Davis is to say or the family is to say. There's an interesting moment where Davis was to talk to Phil when Julia was still alive, and Phil mentioned to Davis, it's like, well, you know what, Davis, I don't really like you all that much. And he just kind of walks off. And so, like, who knows how long a lot of this is just kind of been stewing inside of David, and he's just kind of been putting up with it to the point where he finally just like, blah, by the end of this. So, because Davis actually works with Phil, and he works in finance, supposedly. But then at some point, Davis is to turn around and say, like, well, I don't really do a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm just kind of like transitioning from one thing to the other for people. It's kind of like the one guy from Office Space who they keep asking the guy, it's like, well, like, what exactly do you do? And he's just like, well, I take the customers to the salespeople. And they're like, well, yeah, but what do you do? Like, what do you do other than that? You just do the handoff and what? And so we just had this guy eventually just blow a gasket because like he does do something, but like they don't understand what exactly it is. So he just like ah! anyways, so Davis is to be at this funeral. He's going on and just writing off this letter. And so the first letter is basically saying that, like, hey, to whom this may concern via this vending company. And so he goes on and he writes the fact that he, of course, is to have gone to this vending machine and he was to not get this exchange. And at the same exact time, his wife died, but that had nothing to do with the vending machine. It just is to be a correlation because she died in a car accident. And so he just goes on, and he's like, well, wait, let me tell you about my whole entire day. So I get up at like 5:30 in the. I'm like, man, this is kind of like American Psycho, where you have Christian Bale going on and like telling you how exactly his whole entire day plays out, and how he's just like, yes, and I put these moisturizers, and like I go on and I have this oral scrub, and and I'm just like, wait a minute, what? Like the first time I ever saw this, because this is technically my second time of watching this. Like the first time of watching this, I was just kind of like, wait a minute, like he's really going in depth about this, like this note to this person. And so I went on and I was just like, man, like this is so fascinating how this guy is just like telling every bit of every little truth here. So Davis goes on and he of course is uh meeting this guy on this North Rail who of course is John. And so Davis meets a guy named John and they're exchanging kind of pleasantries and whatever. And so the guy mentions that he works with the Yankees, and Davis is to mention that he is some mattress salesman. And he's like, "Oh, really?" Like John's like, "Oh, really? Like you work with like mattress selling?" It's like, "Wow, that's interesting." So Davis is to go on and put his headphones on. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, and so that kind of tunes the guy out. And so, but the interesting thing that we have these two characters meet for the second time around is Davis is to tell John the truth. That he's like, hey, like, you know what? Like, I didn't realize that I would be seeing you every single day, so I'm gonna tell you the truth. Like, I am just to work in finance, and this guy's going on. He's like, well, I don't work with the Yankees either, because he ended up getting fired for some kind of like visitors bullpen leak because I guess he's like some groundskeeper. So he's working. I think it's some security place where he has this boss that's like 30 years younger than he is, and this guy is kind of telling him what to do and like really irks the crap out of him. And so Davis is to mention that his wife died and from a car accident and he never really loved her. And John's like, oh my God. Like, he's like, yeah, like I never, like, I didn't really, like, love her. It was like, man, that sucks. So, now that we got all that out of the way, um, and how this guy, like, we're finding out more and more things about this, and, like, the more and more we go in depth about this movie, I'm just fascinated by it. It's weird. It's wild. So, Davis, after the funeral, is to just go on and just immediately go back to work, start to do whatever the next thing is. We have Davis's assistant that is just a little confused. She's like, I didn't think you would be here today. Like, I thought you would be kind of home, kind of like grieving and whatever. And Davis is like, no, just kind of like, just pull my appointments, just kind of reschedule this, reschedule that. So all of a sudden, Phil comes into the building, and so Phil pulls Davis aside and it's like, you know what? Why are you here? Davis is like, well, I'm buried with work. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm behind on, and like I gotta start gearing up for a lot of things. And Phil's like, how about we both just let's just have a drink together. Let's just get out of here. And Davis is just like, well, boy, I'm just busy and Phil's like, go and have a drink with me. So Phil and Davis, they're both drinking, and Phil immediately asks, like, why is these drinks so expensive? And so they go on, and Phil starts talking about Julia and how, like, a father should never bury her child. There's a number of like certain scenarios where a wife has to bury a husband, and there's a name for that, but there isn't really a name for a parent having to bury their child. There isn't an actual name of it, and if there ever was, like that'd be a horrible thing. So, while kind of Phil is kind of pouring his heart out to Davis. And at one point, like Phil is telling Davis, is like, you know what, like even though we might have had our differences, Davis, it's like, you know what? Like, I do value you. Like, you are, like, a hard worker, and, like, I do value you. So, Davis goes on, and he is a say in response to all of this stuff. Davis goes on, and he's like, well, the atmosphere. And Phil is just like, what? Davis is like, you're the reason why you're paying for the drink is because of the atmosphere. So, who knows if Davis was really giving a about anything that Phil says? Because, like, really, like, Davis could just really start seeing, like, Phil as a person that's just like, well, you know what? Like, we've had our times together, but, like, we're starting to see David just kind of slip away slowly but surely. So, Davis starts going into work and starts to go into a number of places, and he just starts seeing things differently. He is to just kind of be more like distracted, or really just is like, you know what, I'm just gonna doodle, I'm just gonna whatever. And people are starting to realize this, and they're kind of starting to point that out. So Davis is all of a sudden like, instead of like writing on a piece of paper, just kind of doodling on a piece of paper, he's just writing on this table. He's just like writing a circle into this table. And Phil is asking Davis, is like, Davis, do you need some paper? Do you need some paper there, buddy? And so Phil is also asking Davis, is like, well, do you have anything like you want to contribute to like what's going on here? And like Davis doesn't really have any. So the more and more, all of a sudden, Davis is to start taking apart this bathroom stall that keeps every time he opens it. And so he goes on and takes his TV apart, his office apart, everything that's in there. And so Phil is asking Davis, is like, you know what? Like, you should probably see somebody professionally. You should go on and like talk to someone, because when Davis is to go into Phil's office, Phil confronts Davis about like, did you like put apart all these bathroom stalls, and like, did you take apart your office? And Davis is like, well, yeah, because I want to just see how everything works. Like, I want to see how that clock works over there, that grandfather's clock. And Phil is just like, well, like I inherited that clock. That's a family heirloom. And Davis is like, well, no offense to your family, but I would just love to just pull it apart and just see how it works. Just because. So Phil is telling Davis that he was to take him off the Lightyear account because he just like isn't sure about Davis. Like, he's just very like it doesn't really feel like his head's in the game anymore, and and Phil realizes that. So Phil goes on and is talking to Davis, and he's like, you know what, I think you really need to take some time off. So Davis is like, okay, all right. So he goes on and he leaves. So Davis goes on and is to consistently keep delivering these letters and say whatever anything is to be happening within his days, to kind of reiterate or change up things, or to talk about more stuff about what it all happened. So Davis at one point is mentioning that there seems to be this consistent like station wagon that is consistently following him, and he's kind of weirded out by it, to the point where this guy is like following him and he realizes it, and it gets to the point where Davis is like trying to like swerve quickly to try to get away from this person because he's like, what? Why is this person following me? So Davis goes on, and he, after kind of realizing that like, hey, work's like not going, not wanting me there, so okay, all right, just so Davis starts taking apart that fridge that supposedly is leaking. He just tears it all apart. All of a sudden, he ends up getting a phone call from this girl named Karen. And so Davis kind of picks it up, and Karen is on the line kind of mentioning that she was to go on and read some of Davis's letters, and she was to cry during some of them. Just because of like how just kind of like taken she was by this guy, so much so that she's kind of breaking the rules and calling this person because it's not uh, appropriate from a customer service standpoint. And we have Davis who's just like, well, you find customer service to like be appropriate, like, or like professional, like I don't know about that. So Karen at some point is to hang up with him. So it's like, okay, all right. So all of a sudden, Davis is to go back on again onto this subway, and we have this girl kind of like looking at Davis. I guess maybe Davis is to go on and have told somebody his route, told somebody what he does. Maybe it's that person that was following him through that car. We'll figure that out. So Davis is assigned, because this girl's like looking at him, that he is to go on and sit next to her. Because at one point we had both Davis and Karen who were possibly going to meet one another at this diner, and Karen chickened out and she drove off. Davis was to mention, or was to ask Karen about like, well, hey, why did you chicken out? And Karen was to listen to this heart song, Crazy on You. And so both Karen and Davis like are just kind of looking at one another through this window, and Karen is like, well, like I just would like to like think of you as a person just kind of looking out this window. And Davis is like, well, I want to actually see you because I can't physically see you at all. So then Davis is to go into this meeting where he's kind of drawing a circle into the table, and his real question to ask everybody is like, is Crazy on You by the Hearts a sad song? Like, I don't really know the Hearts all that well. So, and that's all he gave a about. And to where everybody was like starting to sing that song in front of him because they're just like, man, you're going to lose your fucking job. And he's like, I don't care. So Davis goes on to this bus and is now talking to this woman. And he's like, you know what? Like, you look so familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it. So Davis is talking to Karen, and they start to have this bit of dialogue where Davis is to talk about his wife and how, of course, he was to lose her, and how, like, they had gotten married and all this other stuff. So really, when we kind of continue to break down this story, when this woman leaves, Davis is to realize that this girl had a newspaper or a magazine. And so Davis is to pull out the magazine, realizing this is this girl's magazine, and that had her name in it and her address. And so Davis is to follow Karen to her house to find out where she lives. And I'm like, stalker! But when really looking at it, so was Karen. So Davis purposely mailed this letter telling Karen about what had happened on this this subway, and telling Karen it's like, hey, the jig is up. Like, I'm coming for you. So Davis all of a sudden is knocking on this door. Karen is almost finished up reading this letter. And so Davis at one point was to make it to this vending machine company once before, where he was met by a guy named Carl, who I guess is to be the owner there. So, or the guy that works there, let's just say, to just be copacetic, whatever. Anyways, so Karen is to immediately like stop Davis, and so Davis explains to Carl what's going on, and Carl buys it, and so he's like, oh, okay, like, so are you a doctor? And Davis is like, no, I was just somebody that just lost some money off this vending machine. So Carl is like, okay, like, I don't know why you went all the way to this woman's actual house to talk to her, but whatever. So Karen is telling Davis, it's like, well, hey, that's my boyfriend. Like, that's the guy that I've been seeing for a while. Like, don't ruin this for me by kind of just showing up here. But Davis kind of continues to kind of show up there anyways. But Carl goes out of town because he has some business to do. And so Carl is telling Karen, it's like, well, hey, like, you can probably move along with me. Like, you can go to this tech school like you've always wanted, and like we can kind of like figure out how to like kind of benefit ourselves if we go on and have to move to this other location. So Davis continues to go to Karen's house, meeting her son that consistently is to say the F word a lot. And so while Carl is to be away, Davis comes over and smoking weed with Karen that I guess is medicinal. And so they have fun with one another, but Karen is kind of trying to keep distance away from Davis. They're kind of sharing beds at some point. And when Davis is to meet up with Chris, who is Karen's son, Chris is asking, like, Davis is like, well, are you, like, sleeping with her? And he's like, no, we're just friends. So, and that's when Davis is to tell Chris, it's like, you know what, you use the F word a lot. Like, you kind of go on, and when you talk, you say the F word consistently, you make it lose all meaning. Like, you need to kind of use it sparingly, so it has like its effectiveness. So David just continues to kind of like joyride and whatever and continue to have fun. At one point, Davis, considering he likes to just kind of destroy things anyways, all of a sudden is seeing this construction working guys that are just kind of pulling down this house, run by some guy named Jimmy. So Davis is asking these guys, it's like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, well, we're taking down this house. And so Davis is like, well, can I help you guys? Can I, like, work with you? And Jimmy is thinking that this guy is, like, pulling their leg because this guy's, like, wearing this, like, suit and tie and whatever, and it doesn't really make any sense because I guess Davis only has, like, suit and ties, and, like, he at some point has to go on and go shopping and buy all this kind of weird and crazy stuff just because he's like, well, I've never had this before, or I've never worn this before. So Davis goes on and he's just like, hey man, like I'll do this construction job. You don't even have to pay me. Hey, if anything, like I'll pay you to go on and do this job. And they're just like, sure, are you kidding me? Sure. So Davis just starts annihilating this building, just destroying it. And everybody's just kind of weirded out of like, man, this guy is just like a machine. He just never stops. And they're just like, well, F it, right? Like, we have this guy like working with us. It's like, who cares? Like, he's getting the job done. So Davis continues to buy all this kind of weird, wacky stuff. He goes and gets these certain kind of pants and these certain kind of boots to prepare him much better to be a construction worker. So, and then he just starts buying like sledgehammers, and he goes to this like Salvation store and is buying these like bulletproof vests and gas masks and all these like weird, absurd items just because he can. So, so we have it where at one point, the more that Davis is hanging around with Chris is to kind of showcase Davis some music. And so now, like, Davis, instead of just kind of walking normally in the streets of Calcutta, or wherever the heck setting this is, Davis is kind of like dancing around and kind of like, yeah, like I'm getting into this music, woo! And so everybody around him is like kind of freaking out. It's like, am I gonna get poked in the eye by this guy by accident? Because he's just kind of like flaying and swinging and dancing and whatever. Because Davis at one point is to tell Karen like some kind of like past stories. Uh, like when they were in the subway together, Davis didn't really want to marry Julia. It was just easy for him to marry her. I guess it was just like, hey, she's rich. She likes me, I guess, at that time. So, like, or maybe both of them were really rich. And so, because we even have it where Davis's, like, parents are just kind of hanging out by Davis's house. And Davis's parents is, like, kind of wanting him to move in. Or we have, like, Davis's father that is just, I guess, this gardener, and he's like Davis's dad is like telling him how to run his house. Like, it's like, well, hey, like you should really have these guys like spray for these gypsy mosses. And Davis is like, well, why? Like, are they ever gonna come here? And the dad's like, well, I don't know, but just spray down for it anyways. It's like a thing that never comes here. You're just wanting somebody just randomly spray down things, and Davis is like, well, I have guys that can do all of this. And but like the dad is coming up with like one random thing that these guys would have no reason to want to do for any whatever. So Davis's parents is at one point like telling him, it's like, well, we do have the spare room, you can kind of come back with us and just kind of live with us. And Davis is just like, nah. Like, because the dad is like, well, yeah, we could still build that gazebo. I'm like, yeah, gazebo, that sounds great. Gazebos suck to build, and really, like, but I guess for Davis, like, wanting to, like, he wants to rather destroy things, not build things, so, like, it probably would make sense for Davis to try and put a gazebo together, because, again, I've taken apart and put together a number of gazebos. They are freaking annoying. And really, like, gazebos, I think, are honestly a waste of money. Unless you're a person that is a consistent cooker outside, or if you're a person that always hosts outdoor parties, and you live out in nowhere, because freaking a neighborhood just full of people who have gazebos and party outside just is. Um, but yeah, gazebos are a pain in the butt to put together. I know. I've put a time or two together. And then whenever I would go to another store, all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, have you ever put a gazebo up?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and I don't want to put together another one. Like I've put together like I've taken and put apart like 5 to 10 already before I came here. I'm not going to put those together. Have your lawn and garden guys go on and put those bad boys together. That's what they're there for. They have all the time in the world to just, like, when they're not selling, they could just be putting something together. Like, well, but you, and I'm like, no, I've done it before. No, I don't care if I'm the expert. I don't care if I've put them together. People have nothing but time out there on the floor today, like, especially because like they put it up on months that are completely dead, and I know they're dead. So I'm just like, why not just have somebody build it? It's not going to take like 5 hours to put together. It probably takes about two, if you have a number of people. Because usually, if someone's back there, they're putting it back there by themselves, and they would just have to put it out there anyway. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense. So, no offense to those people who I've ever worked with before, but a gazebo just doesn't make sense. It's a small enough item to be able to actually put out on the floor and build. But anyways, people don't get it. It is what it is. So, pushing on to my sob story, my bad. So, why is he saying the story? Because I can. Because I know. So, Davis goes on and he is, of course, hangs out with Karen, and so they continue to hang out together. Davis is going on and being with Chris to the point where Davis and Chris are going shopping together, just buying a bunch of random items. And so Chris is kind of being honest with Davis, and he's kind of having thoughts about either possibly being like liking girls or possibly liking boys. So much the extension of the fact that Chris kind of fantasizes about being with guys, and Davis is just like, well, here's the thing. More than likely, what you should probably try and do is just kind of like pretend to like girls for a number of years, and then after that, like go on and find a place that's kind of populated with a certain kind of people. Like go on to certain locations like LA or like some kind of place where you can go on and just kind of be yourself, and it's okay if that's what you decide. Because like with Chris, like we can go on and say it's like, well, he's still young, like he can be whoever he wants. But hey, like I would easily accept this guy, either way of which that he is to define himself. So Davis goes on and he is going with Chris, and now Chris is asking Davis, is like, hey, what are you doing? And Davis is like, I'm taking apart my marriage. So Davis is telling Chris just destroy everything in this guy's house. So in Davis's own house, he's destroying and annihilating everything, to the point of Davis even buying a bulldozer and destroying his house with this bulldozer. And all of a sudden, Davis is to get the bulldozer started, but then all of a sudden the bulldozer stopped. And Davis is to think that he possibly broke the bulldozer. And Chris is like, well, like, did you buy the warranty for this? Like this item? And Davis is like, ooh, yeah. So we just have a bulldozer that's like parked like on top of a house. And so I guess Davis is just gonna kind of like continue to live in this house that's just kind of in shambles because I guess he really doesn't care. So we get to a point where both Karen and Davis are going out to this get together because Phil is consistently hounding Davis about this thing that he needs to sign for this kind of thing that they're trying to do for Julia, trying to do this like foundation thing where they kind of give people scholarships away and so on and so forth. So Davis goes on with Karen is to like Karen is to buy weed, and Davis is to realize that there's this kind of fair or carousel, and Davis is like, well, hey, like, guy, like, what are you gonna do with this carousel? And he's like, well, I'm probably gonna have to like destroy it because nobody likes carousels anymore. Davis is like, well, I have some tools. I can help destroy this thing. And the guy's like, I don't know. So Davis and Karen go on to this party, and so Phil grabs Davis and puts him into this room, and Phil is upset with Davis because really it's like, hey, like, you brought a girl here to this place, really? Like, this is Julia's moment, and so on and so really, like, Davis doesn't announce this girl as a friend, as a whatever, but like Phil immediately just makes that assumption that it's like, oh, like, what if it's like Phil's just family member? Like, it's his second cousin or something like that. Like, Phil doesn't know, and Davis isn't going to tell him that either. So Davis goes on, and he's like, you know what, the real reason why I'm here? Here's the papers. They're signed. There you go. You happy now? So Karen is to go on and smoke, I'm sure probably some weed, and it's to meet a guy who basically just wants to feel her up, and Karen walks away from him. So both Davis and Karen are to kind of come to the room as they're kind of announcing these scholarship winners. And so Phil goes on and he's just like, you know what? Like, we have so much freaking money flowing around that we couldn't just kind of pick one person. We had to pick three different people to change their lives via this scholarship. And it's like, well, like, yeah, because you guys must just have endless amounts of money to just chuck around, right? You and your money to just chuck around. So he doesn't like rich people. I love rich people. Rich people are great. And really, it's like, well, hey, like, you should see that as like people trying to help out, like people who are to probably be struggling and are to earn and whatever. Yeah, but I'm also to see it as just like kind of like being so grandiose that they have like, oh, we're gonna just pick multiple, like uh, anyways. So Karen just starts laughing and she walks away, and Davis is to mention something about Julia and he walks off. So all of a sudden we have uh Margaret, sure, we have Julia's mother that is to go on and tell Davis that Davis was to find out that Julia was pregnant a year ago and asked if the family had asked her about it. So Davis walks off, and Julia's mother is to tell Davis, is like, well, you want to know why nobody really said anything about it? Because the father of that child wasn't you. It was someone else. Julia was having an affair on Davis with somebody else. So really, with that, Davis is like, well, that's why I don't give a about this woman. Sadly, he just doesn't feel anything because he probably knew. Probably in his mind, he's probably thinking, yeah, this girl has another horse in the stable and there's nothing I can do. And it's just been like us for like too long, kind of just struggling to keep this thing together. And like, there's probably a number of other things that we would have, like, I would have liked to have known, like how long has it been before they get bang to bang? Because that would also just be like, well, yeah, they've probably just been going through the motions for a long. Who knows? Any number of things could have happened via this relationship. So, and Davis could have probably realized that if this accident wasn't going to happen, like probably them getting divorced or breaking up or some kind of something was bound to happen at some point, just because both of them were kind of like not really listening to one another, or just like yeah, whatever, sure, all right. So so Davis finds out that this guy or that Julia was cheating. So Davis is to go and do construction, and at one point he's to kind of step back, and he accidentally steps on this nail that goes completely through this guy's foot, through the shoe into this guy's foot. And I'm like, yeah, like there was one time where I was like really lucky and I had to like step back against something because I was just kind of chucking this really heavy item and I kind of had to lob it over. And as I was going on and I was like backpedaling, I stepped on this thing that had a nail on it. And I was like, oh my God, like, please do not tell me that I'm going to be like ripping. But luckily, like, my boot that I had on that day was so like long enough that like nothing really pierced anything. I'm like, thank God. And then I just kind of chucked whatever that piece was in there. I'm like, I'm probably gonna need a new shoe soon. Sure, far enough, I need a new shoe anyways, because a lot of times when you do like certain kind of jobs, shoes don't last very long. They last like 3 months, and then you're like, oh crap, I gotta get new ones. Like that's why they would give us like these vouchers to get free boots because we run through them like every couple of months. Plus, these were boots anyways, to where it's like, oh, whatever the free ones were, they weren't worth the. Like after a month, I'm like, man, this thing is falling apart. Like, you guys need to get some better freaking boots. And they're just like, well, like this is all we offer. I'm like, you guys need to jack up the price of like, I need to get like investment kind of boots, so that way I won't have to keep exchanging them for these kind of cheaper end things. Because anything that they had to use, I'm like, I don't like. I'm not gonna use those. Like those aren't like good enough. So I'd have to go to other stores and find better boots that would last longer, like a Walmart or something like that, some kind of real store that had good boots, because the kind they had were just dirt cheap. So the worst. Like any of these people who designed these shoes didn't have like a construction kind of way or mind about them, because they were just trying to manufacture them cheaply, in all honesty. That's the worst thing about certain like places that are like, oh yeah, just give these free. There's a reason why they're free. So they didn't last that long. So Davis is going home after Jimmy is to kind of lay him off. Jimmy goes on and is to kind of run his foot that has a hole in it just through this water, and we really don't really see what he's like bandaging or if it gets infected or whatever. Like we just kind of continue to go on as if this is kind of like the normal whatever kind of stuff. So we at some point escalate this story, and so Karen at one point is finding out that her son had gone to this party and he had gotten the crap beat out of him. And so Karen is taking care of her son. Davis is to make it back to Karen's place for all of a sudden Carl to show up. And Carl is now beating the crap out of Davis, thinking that Davis was having an affair with Karen, which wasn't really true. Carl just tosses the change that Davis couldn't get out of this vending machine. And so Davis then finds out that Karen is at this hospital, and Davis is to find out what happened through Karen, and Karen is to see Chris and just be like, well, you know what, like, no one's gonna ever hurt you, I'm never gonna hurt you, but like once you get out of this, you're gonna get in a heaping amount of trouble. So Chris eventually does get out of the hospital and he's fine. And so what happens by the very ending of this story is we have Davis who goes on to this kind of pier where a bunch of people are, I guess, at some point just firing off like these random fireworks. You really don't know what's going on. You hear sounds, but you don't really know what's going on. We find out that Chris isn't actually in this location, and that like Chris is just kind of leading Davis to kind of just run off and do whatever. We also had Davis that was to go to Julia's grave, and so finally we get to find out what that whole station wagon was that was consistently following Davis. So finally we have this guy come clean, and Davis is thinking that this guy, Michael, is to be the guy that had an affair with his wife. And Michael is telling Davis, no, like, I'm not that guy. I'm actually the guy that was to hit your wife, and I've consistently been wanting to try to get in touch with you, or to try and talk to you and tell you that I'm sorry about what happened. And so Davis is just like, oh, okay, all right. So Davis goes on and he talks to Phil, and he's like, you know what, like, I finally started to realize now that the whole like foundation thing, like what you were trying to do with Julia, that's a nice thing. That's a nice gesture. Like, but really, here is what I would want to do as long as you would like be willing to do it. So Phil is just like, okay, like what? So we find out that Dave is to restore the carousel, and he is to make it operational again, because I guess the most fun moments that Davis and Julia were to have were to be in that carousel. So Phil does restore it, and we have all these characters that are all playing around on this carousel. And Phil is to look at Davis and like, yeah, like we're having fun, and Davis goes on and he kind of leaves the carousel and just kind of watches everybody go on. I'm kind of wondering if Julia had any real like, if that was like a childhood thing that she would always continue to go to this carousel. Maybe like she never liked any of the other rides, but like a carousel like was always something that she loved, and coincidentally both Davis and Julia were to share that carousel together. Maybe there's a whole story about that isn't really there, but would be interesting if we knew about that. But it is what it is with this story. So with that said, I'm sure that I've taken far too long to talk about all this, but I don't care. It's just the one thing about me where I'm just like, meh, like, I liked this film, I liked this movie, and it doesn't matter how long I took to talk about it, because at the end of the day, I I review this movie and it's gone and it's out and you'll see it at some point. So definitely check this film out. There's many convenient ways to say you've seen this movie. So by golly, go ahead and do so. So bye everybody. Bye everybody.